So this is part 2. If you didn't listen to part 1 and work on it first, go do that and then come back to this one. So we're continuing to work on some analysis so that we can give guidance to Larry. So what we're going to do is create cash flow projections for the March through December time frame, where we know actual cash for the first 2 months. So Larry's been very disappointed. He got a sales forecast and he fell very far short. And so we want to be very careful not to try to give him a rosier picture, because he's already been burned by that. So in all of our predictions here, we're going to do realistic or conservative predictions. So we're not going to predict more than 202 units. You could even predict fewer units. You could even figure out what break-even units might be from a cash flow point of view. How many units would you have to sell in this 12-month period in order to not have negative cash flow? That would be an interesting analysis that you could do for your client. Alright, so we're going to use the 202, and I'm going to use that for every month. And then there were no cash inflows from locators in January. The only inflow we got in January was from Larry. There were no payments for locators. The American Express didn't come until February. We didn't pay for the January cell phone until February. We did pay the rent. We did pay payroll. We didn't have any dealer commission. We didn't have any warranty. We did have some other miscellaneous expenses. Looks like we had some office supplies. And you could have also added that over here to if you wanted to. It looks relatively minor. I wouldn't have necessarily worried with it in terms of, that's not the problem. That's not the problem that Larry is having. Larry is not having a cash flow crisis because of $200 of office expenses. So I would not expect very much attention for that $200 item to be in your final analysis. The problem, at least about 11,000 of his problem, is selling less than 300 units. The rest of the problem we're hoping to discover here. Alright, so the net change in cash is going to be the sum of anything above it here. Beginning cash, what was beginning cash here? No beginning cash. Ending cash 306. Okay, so that looks fine. Alright, now let's do February. What happened in February? In February we got the cash from the dealers. Let's format this also. We're happy with it. Okay. And we got some cash for the monitoring. And we got another loan. Alright. Now we did pay for some locators in February. And we did pay the American Express, which were January items. And we did pay for some cell phone service. And we did pay for rent. And we did pay payroll for customer service and website. And there were no other items. So for February, okay, so the beginning was 306. What did I leave out here? Oh, the commission. Okay, and now we balance back to the February balance. Okay, and so now we're going to make predictions. So what do you want to predict? So if you're going to predict that 202 will continue, which is the max I would predict, you could predict 90% of that if you wanted to be conservative. That's up to you. You could do it two different ways. You could do it at 202. You could do it at 90% of 202. You could do it at break even and show that to your client, 3 different scenarios. If you wanted, that'd be very powerful. But if you were just going to assume that we're going to continue the 202 way, now they're not getting, for whatever reason, subscriptions for every locator they're selling. I don't know why. So for all 202, they're only getting subscriptions for some fraction. So you could put in an assumption on the input tab over here for subscription rates and let Larry play with it and link those over here to your cash flow. Or you could tell Larry you're just going to assume that that proportion, however many, I don't know how many that is, 6120, you could divide it out by the 120 and figure out how many customers is that. Only 51 of the 202 are subscribing, so he's only getting about a fourth of them. Or maybe there's a delay and there'll be a lot more coming in, but we do not want to overestimate for Larry because he has been so burned. So I probably would just leave it there. Hopefully there won't be any more loans. We bought 1,000 locators. When would you have to buy another 1,000 locators? So 1,000 locators should last you almost 5 months. So maybe in April we should buy another bit, and then that should last you until September, maybe something like that. So you just kind of gauge, maybe buy it in the month before you're going to run out. So that would be 1,800. So that would be before you would run out. Okay, and then you can assume that you're always going to be 1 month behind on your American Express, that you're always paying the prior month. All right, it'd be good if I anchored that before I copied it over. All right, now the cell phone service. This was cell phone service for 202, but we didn't get 202 subscriptions. We only got about a fourth of that, 50 some odd. But we're going to have cell phone service for the new subscriptions that come on. So however many we're assuming, this many, divide it by the subscription amount. So that's how many cell phones we are covering. And we should be multiplying that times the cell phone cost. So we should be predicting an outflow of about that. So we paid for all 202, but hopefully Larry will wise up and not pay for, and you could indicate to him that don't pay for cell phone service on customers that didn't sign up for the monitoring service. So either you're going to have additional revenues to cover and you're going to need to pay for additional cell phone service, or just pay for those that signed up for the actual service. Now when you copy this over, you'll have to add in the new month. So you're going to want, so let's fix this. The input thing has to be anchored there. Okay, so then when I copy this over, oh, I've got to anchor both of those. Okay. Well, you're getting a lesson in paying attention to your anchoring. All right, I want to include the January one in there as well. So let's add that in. And then every month, as I sell more, I want to add in that additional month here, so that I am paying for the ones that have paid for subscriptions, that I'm including that in here, and so forth. You get the idea. Hopefully you get the idea that I'm budgeting or expecting that my cash flow is going to include paying $8 a month for cell phones that have subscribed. So by adding up all the subscription revenue that I've gotten, the annual subscription revenue, even though they've only paid in January, I've got to cover them for the next 12 months. So I'm tracking how many subscribers I have, active subscribers, and paying $8 a month for those. So hopefully Larry will start only paying for active subscribers. That certainly would be your recommendation. And one more. So something like that. So that's going to grow. Now, in January, if you took this out another step, which you certainly could do, you could go as far out as you felt comfortable going, you're going to get an additional $61.20 from last year's renewals. I don't know what sort of renewal percentage rate you want to assume, plus the new subscribers that sign up. So at this point, even though the cell phone service is growing, you'll start getting the renewal revenue in addition to the revenue from new subscriptions being added because you sold new hardware and some of them subscribed. All right, so there's no reason to think that the rent's going to change, so we would copy that over. I don't know if you want to assume that anybody's going to get a raise after 6 months. You could certainly assume that if you wanted. Dealer commission. It should stay about the same. At some point there probably will be some warranty costs, and you could assume some if you wanted. So now you have a cash flow projection that gives you an idea over time what is more realistic for Larry to expect. So what you want to do here is interpret this for Larry. What does this mean? How does this relate back to that longer term expected profit of about $15,000 a month? That doesn't mean cash flow of $15,000 per month. You may want to make this a graph so that you can see that some months we go up and some months we go down. So you can see some months we have positive and some months we have negative cash flow. Why is that? Even though cumulatively it does appear that cash does start to grow. Why didn't it grow in January? Why didn't it grow in February? Larry needs to understand that. Why did it all of a sudden pop up in March? So this looks like good news for him. It needs to be explained in everyday language. So in your project, you're going to write Larry a memo, and you're going to start off with cash flow. I understand that you haven't seen any cash flow. There were important reasons for that. You should experience greater cash flow in the near future. And then go through why there wasn't cash flow in January and February and why it's now fixed and what he can expect over the long term. Be sure to let him know that this is based on sales staying at 202. This is based on warranty costs not being incurred at all, and so that's maybe too optimistic. You may want to put some warranty in there. You could put other things in here that you think are conservative, like raises or price increases or something like that. If you do, of course, share all those assumptions, put them on the input tab and share them with your client. If you do a high cash flow like this one and then a low cash flow or a break-even cash flow, so the question is, so for instance, let's put this to 100. Whoops, that's not going to change anything because nothing's key to it. Is it this one? Okay, so this cash flow needs to be fixed so that it keys off of the units sold, not just off of what happened in actual February. So let's make that happen. and we're going to put some kind of assumption in that cell down there. Let's put that assumption in. Okay. Actually, for cash flow, I shouldn't divide it by 12 because I'm going to get the whole subscription at the front. Okay. So now, let's fix all of these to not just be February's actual, but to be responsive. Is that the packing and shipping? Packing and shipping and epoxy. Okay. Let's do both of those. So here's your packing and shipping and your epoxy. And let's anchor both of those. Okay. Do we need to anchor anything here? Yes. Do we need to anchor anything there? Yes. So that I can copy it across. Okay, cell phone service. I got that one. Okay. Rent's the same no matter what. We're assuming payroll will be the same. Okay, so now this needs to point to that cell. Okay, so watch what we're going to do here. So let's fix these formulas. Now let's fix, when were we going to buy? We're going to buy in April, and then, was it September? Yes. Okay. Alright. Well, that made things look prettier. Oh. I'm going to make that a minus. There we go. And of course, you could show repaying Larry, because obviously there's adequate cash to pay interest and loans back to Larry. So that's up to you if you want to include that in here. All right, what is it I wanted to show you? So let's change the units to, so we can reduce it down. So even at 100 units, we're still at positive cash flow. And so you can play with it and say, wow, okay, you can go pretty far down. Oops, too far. So anyway, you can do some other things that would be value added for your client to tell them not only is cash coming and in what amounts, conservatively, but that you could even sell less than 202 and still do okay. So now I leave it up to you to craft that client advice memo. Be sure not to use technical terms. Be sure to lead off with the cash flow problem has been addressed, and then a realistic expectation for your client.